I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 6:15, 15 minutes late on purpose. Through the dining room window, I could see them already seated around the table. My brother Brandon was gesturing wildly with his wine glass, probably in the middle of another story about his recent promotion. My mother's face was lit up with that proud smile she reserved exclusively for him. My father was nodding along, that look of satisfaction he got when discussing his son's achievements. I sat in my car for a moment, checking my phone one last time. 3 emails from my attorney, 2 from my CFO, and 1 from the Wall Street Journal reporter I'd been dodging all week. The acquisition had closed at 4 p.m. today. $32 million. Cash. The biggest real estate deal in Milwaukee's North Shore in the last decade. And nobody in that house had any idea. Not that they'd asked. I grabbed the bottle of wine from my passenger seat and headed inside. The November air bit at my cheeks, and I could smell my mother's famous herb-roasted turkey before I even opened the door. Mom was the first to spot me. Her smile flickered for just a second before brightening again, but it was different, thinner. The smile you give the neighbor's kid who showed up uninvited. "Emily, honey, you made it." She stood to hug me, already glancing back toward Brandon. "We were just hearing about Brandon's news. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible coming from the city." I handed her the wine, a $90 Pinot Noir that I knew she wouldn't notice. Brandon leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk already spreading across his face. He'd always had this way of taking up space, of making every room feel like his stage. "Emmy, good to see you. How's the rental business going?" The rental business. That's what he called it. What they all called it. Like I was some small-time landlord, collecting checks on a duplex. "It's going well," I said, taking my seat at the far end of the table, the spot that used to be reserved for my grandmother before she passed. Now, it was just the reject chair, the overflow seating. Dad barely looked up from carving the turkey. Brandon was just telling us about his new position, regional sales director, youngest person to ever hold the title at Midwest Medical Solutions. "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it. Brandon had worked hard for that promotion. He'd been grinding away at that medical supply company for 7 years, working his way up from an entry-level sales position. The problem wasn't that he didn't deserve recognition. The problem was that it was the only thing they ever wanted to talk about. "Thanks, sis." Brandon raised his glass. "It comes with a pretty sweet compensation package. Base salary of $140,000, plus commission. I should clear close to $200K this year." Mom actually clapped, like he'd just won an Olympic medal. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she beamed. "You've worked so hard for this." I took a long sip of water, focusing on the ice cubes clinking against the glass. Dad finally finished carving and took his seat at the head of the table. "It's good to see you settling down, son. Building a real career. Stability matters." The implication hung in the air like smoke, unlike your sister. "Oh, speaking of settling down," Brandon's wife Jennifer chimed in, touching his arm with that possessive little gesture she always made. "We have more news." "Here it comes," I thought. "We're buying a house," Brandon announced, grinning. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. Great school district in Whitefish Bay. We close next month. Mom actually gasped. "Oh my God, that's amazing!" "Jennifer, you must be so excited." Jennifer launched into a detailed description of the house. The granite countertops, the finished basement, the master suite with a walk-in closet. I watched my mother's face glow brighter with each detail. This was what she'd always wanted. Her son, married, successful, buying a house in a good neighborhood, checking all the boxes. I pushed a green bean around my plate. "What about you, Emily?" Dad finally asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer would disappoint him. "Seeing anyone?" "Not seriously," I said. Mom sighed. Actually sighed. "Honey, you're 32 years old. Don't you think it's time to start thinking about your future? About building something real?" "Building something real?" I almost laughed. If only they knew. "I am building something, Mom. My business is doing really well, actually." "Oh, right, your rental properties." Dad said it the way you'd say your MLM scheme or your Etsy shop. "How many houses do you own now? 3? 4? Something like that," I said quietly. Brandon leaned forward. "You know, Em, I've been thinking, With my new salary and the house purchase, I'm starting to get more serious about investments. Maybe you could give me some advice? You know, the landlord perspective. I'm thinking about buying a rental property myself. Something small, a condo, maybe, for passive income. My mother nodded enthusiastically. That's smart, Brandon. It's good to diversify. Emily, you should help your brother. Share some of your experience. I smiled. I'd be happy to. Actually, Dad said, cutting into his turkey, speaking of real estate, you should talk to Emily about property management too. Now that you're going to be a homeowner, Brandon, you might need someone to handle things if you travel for work. Emily probably knows some good handymen. She must have a whole roster by now. A whole roster. Like I was running a TaskRabbit service. I do know some good contractors, I said evenly. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It was Marcus, my CFO. Congratulations, boss. The announcement is live. Prepare for chaos tomorrow. I set the phone face down on the table. Work? Jennifer asked, in that tone that suggested she couldn't imagine what kind of work emergency I could possibly have. Just a colleague, I said. Brandon launched into another story. This one about a major sale he'd closed last week. $50,000 in medical equipment to a hospital network. He described the negotiation like it was a scene from a thriller movie. Mom and Dad hung on every word. I ate my turkey. It was good. Mom had outdone herself. I wished I could just enjoy it. The best part, Brandon was saying, is that this sale puts me in the running for the company's President's Club. If I hit my numbers next quarter, Jennifer and I get an all-expenses-paid trip to Cabo. First-class flights, 5-star resort, the works. Oh, Brandon, that's incredible, Mom said. Dad raised his glass. To Brandon. My successful son. They all clinked glasses. I lifted mine and took a small sip. Nobody toasted to me. But then again, nobody ever did. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Mom brought out her famous pumpkin pie. Dad poured coffee. Brandon stretched out on the couch like he owned the place. Jennifer curled up next to him. I took the armchair in the corner, the one with the broken spring that nobody ever sat in. So, Emily, Dad said, settling into his recliner, what's your 5-year plan? Still planning to just collect rent checks? I have some expansion plans, I said carefully. Expansion. He nodded slowly. More properties? Yes. Well, just be careful. Real estate can be risky. Especially if you're over-leveraged. The market can turn on you fast. I'm aware of the risks, Dad. Brandon sat up. Actually, Dad makes a good point, Em. Have you thought about what happens if the market crashes? Or if you can't find tenants? My company offers great benefits and job security. Maybe you should consider getting a real job. I could probably get you an interview in our admin department. They're always looking for office managers. Office manager. At my brother's company, where he could introduce me as my sister, who works in admin. That's thoughtful, Brandon, but I'm good with what I'm doing. I'm just saying, he pressed, it's not too late to build a real career. You're still young enough. And honestly, the whole landlord thing, it's not exactly impressive when you're trying to date. Guys want a woman with ambition, with a future. Jennifer nodded along. He's right, Emily. When Brandon and I met, I was working in marketing. Having a career made me more attractive. It showed I had goals. I set my coffee cup down very carefully on the side table. My hands were shaking slightly. I appreciate the advice, I said, my voice tight. Mom leaned forward, her face full of that concerned mother expression that I'd seen 1,000 times. Sweetie, we're just worried about you. You're alone in that apartment in the city. You don't have a partner. You don't have a stable career path. What are you building toward? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? 10 years. I almost told them right then. Almost pulled out my phone and showed them the Wall Street Journal article that would go live at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Almost explained that in 10 years, I'd probably own half the commercial real estate in downtown Milwaukee. But I didn't, because I realized something sitting in that broken armchair, holding that coffee cup, watching my family look at me with pity and concern and barely concealed disappointment. I realized I wanted to see their faces when they found out on their own. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my assistant. Press release scheduled for 6 a.m. NYT, WSJ, and Milwaukee Journal Sentinel all confirmed. Your calendar tomorrow is insane. Good luck. I smiled. What's so funny? Brandon asked. Nothing, I said. Just a text from a friend. Dad cleared his throat. Well, since we're all here, your mother and I wanted to discuss something with you kids. Oh God. Here it comes, the inheritance talk. The Brandon gets the house because he has a family conversation. Your mother and I are getting older, Dad continued. We've been thinking about our estate planning. We want to make sure everything is fair and square. Fair and square. Right. Now, Brandon, you and Jennifer are starting a family soon, we hope. Mom smiled at them. You'll need more support. So we were thinking of helping with your down payment on the new house. Maybe $50,000? To help you get started. Brandon's eyes widened. Mom, Dad, that's incredibly generous. You've earned it, son, Dad said. You've built something real, something stable. I waited for it. The part where they offered me something too, maybe $10,000 for rental property repairs or business expenses. The scraps from the table, but there was nothing. They just smiled at Brandon and Jennifer, basking in the glow of their golden child's success. I stood up. I need to use the restroom. Excuse me. In the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink. I looked at myself in the mirror. Same Emily. Same brown eyes. Same dark hair that Mom always said I should style more professionally. Same face that had never been quite pretty enough, quite polished enough, quite enough. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my emails. The final closing documents from the acquisition, the deed transfer, the corporate filings. Hamilton Properties Group was officially mine. All 32 buildings, 1,200 apartment units, 40 retail spaces, prime downtown locations, commercial real estate worth somewhere north of $200 million. And I'd bought it with cash I'd made myself, starting from zero. From that first foreclosed duplex I'd bought at 23 with my student loan refund check, working 3 jobs to make the mortgage, learning construction from YouTube videos because I couldn't afford contractors. Slowly, painfully, building an empire while my family asked when I was going to get a real job. I heard laughter from the living room. Brandon's voice, loud and confident, telling another story. I washed my hands, reapplied my lipstick, and went back out. They were looking at something on Brandon's phone. He was showing them pictures of the new house. Emily, look at this kitchen, Mom said, turning the phone toward me. Isn't it gorgeous? It's beautiful, I agreed. Maybe one day you'll have something like this, she said, and her voice was so kind, so genuinely hopeful, that it actually hurt worse than if she'd been cruel. I sat back down in my broken chair. Brandon tucked his phone away. So, seriously, if you want that intro to my HR department, just say the word. They're pretty desperate right now. You could probably start next month. The benefits are great. Health insurance, 401k match, 3 weeks vacation. 3 weeks vacation. To work in my little brother's office. To have him walk past my desk every day and feel magnanimous for helping me. Actually, I said slowly, I have some news too. The room went quiet. They all turned to look at me with varying expressions of polite interest. The kind of interest you show when the boring person at the party finally speaks up. Oh? Mom said. Did you buy another rental? Something like that. Dad nodded. Well, good for you. Just remember what I said about overextending yourself. I'll keep that in mind. I took a breath. I closed on a property today, actually. Today? On Thanksgiving? Jennifer looked scandalized. That seems inconsiderate to the sellers. They didn't mind, I said. It was a corporate acquisition. Everyone wanted to close before the end of the quarter. Brandon laughed. Corporate acquisition. Listen to you with the fancy business talk. What'd you buy? A strip mall. An investment property portfolio, I said carefully. How many units? Dad asked. 1,200. The room went silent. I'm sorry, Mom said. Did you say 1,200? Yes. Brandon laughed again, but this time it was uncertain. That's not funny. You can't just make up numbers. I'm not making it up. Dad set down his coffee. Emily, 1,200 units would be. That would be millions of dollars. Tens of millions. 32 million, actually. The final number came in a bit higher than the initial bid. Nobody spoke. They just stared at me. "You're joking," Brandon finally said. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Found the congratulatory message from my attorney with the closing documents attached. Handed the phone to my father. He read it. His face went pale. "This is real," he whispered. "Yes. You bought Hamilton Properties." "Yes." Mom reached for the phone. "Read it." Her hand started shaking. Brandon grabbed it next. I watched his eyes move across the screen, getting wider and wider. This says you're the sole owner. This says you paid cash. This says," he looked up at me, really looked at me. Maybe for the first time in years. "How?" I shrugged. "I've been buying properties for 9 years. I started with one duplex, then another, then a small apartment building. I learned construction, did most of the renovations myself, saved every penny, bought more, reinvested everything, learned property management, learned commercial real estate, learned how to spot undervalued assets, learned how to negotiate. About 3 years ago, I started targeting larger portfolios. I've been assembling this deal for 18 months. But," Mom's voice was faint, "you never said anything. You never asked." The silence stretched out like taffy. "Wait," Jennifer said, her voice sharp. "If this is real, then you're a millionaire." "Technically, yes. On paper. Most of it's in equity." Brandon was still staring at the phone. The press release says. "It says the acquisition makes you one of the largest private property owners in Milwaukee. It says you own more downtown real estate than anyone under 40 in the entire Midwest." "The WSJ article comes out tomorrow morning," I said, along with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel piece. "There's going to be a lot of attention. My publicist has been preparing me for interviews." "Your publicist?" The words hung in the air. Dad was just shaking his head slowly, like he couldn't process what he was hearing. "I don't understand," he said. "How did we not know? I didn't tell you." "But why?" I looked at him, really looked at him. At his confused face, his hurt expression. At my mother, who looked like someone had just told her the sky was green. At Brandon, who was still scrolling through the documents on my phone, like he was trying to find the punchline. "Because," I said quietly, "I wanted to see if you'd ever be proud of me for who I was, not what I had. I wanted to see if you'd ever ask about my business. Actually ask, not just dismiss it. I wanted to see if you'd ever look at me the way you look at Brandon." "Emily, that's not fair," Mom said. "We've always been proud of you." "Have you?" She opened her mouth, closed it. "When was the last time you asked about my properties? About my business? About my goals?" Silence. "I've been coming to these dinners for years, and every single time, it's the same. Brandon's latest achievement, Brandon's promotion, Brandon's sales numbers, Brandon's house. And when you do talk to me, it's to ask when I'm going to settle down. Get a real job, find a man, build something stable." My voice was steady. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was just done. "I've been building something stable," I continued. "I've been building an empire. Brick by brick. Property by property. I worked 3 jobs for the first 5 years. I learned plumbing at night. I taught myself electrical work. I spent my weekends covered in drywall dust and paint. I missed holidays because I was dealing with frozen pipes and broken furnaces. I was exhausted. I was lonely. I was scared out of my mind half the time. Brandon was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. And every time I came here, I said, every single time, you asked when I was going to get serious about my future. Like what I was doing didn't count. Like it wasn't real. "We didn't know," Mom whispered. "Because you didn't ask." Dad stood up abruptly, paced to the window, looked out at the dark street. $32 million, he said to his own reflection in the glass. "Yes, in cash. Yes. Where did you get $32 million in cash?" "I made it. I saved it. I invested it. I sold some of my smaller properties to free up capital. I took out some strategic loans against my existing portfolio. I worked 90-hour weeks for the better part of a decade." He turned around. "Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me?" The question sat there between us, like a third rail. Brandon finally handed back my phone. His hand was shaking slightly. When you said you had some rental properties, I thought you meant like, I don't know, 4 or 5 houses, maybe a small apartment building, not a commercial real estate empire. I know what you thought. Jennifer was doing math on her phone. If you own 1,200 units, and the average rent in Milwaukee is like $1,200 a month, her eyes widened. That's over $1 million a month in rental income. Before expenses, I said. Property management, maintenance, mortgages on a few of the buildings, property taxes. But yes, it's profitable. More silence. Mom was crying now, quiet tears running down her cheeks. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Mom. I feel like we don't even know you. You don't, I said gently. You never tried to. Brandon stood up, paced, sat back down. I just offered you a job, in admin, making probably $40,000 a year. I know. And you make. I'm comfortable. He laughed. A wild, slightly hysterical laugh. Comfortable. Jesus, Em. You're rich. Like actually rich. I prefer financially secure. Dad sat back down heavily in his recliner. He looked old suddenly, tired. All this time, he said. All this time we thought you were struggling. We worried about you. I know you did. We just wanted you to have stability. Security. Like your brother. I looked at Brandon. He couldn't meet my eyes. I have more security than Brandon will ever have, I said. And it wasn't mean. It was just true. I own my properties outright. I have multiple revenue streams. I've diversified across residential and commercial. I have a team of property managers, contractors, accountants, and attorneys. I have a financial advisor and an investment portfolio. I have security, but you're alone, Mom said, and her voice broke on the word. Yes, I agreed. I'm alone. Because I've spent the last 9 years building something instead of dating. Because I prioritized my business over relationships. Because I made choices. Don't you want a family? Jennifer asked. Children? Maybe someday. Or maybe not. I haven't decided yet. But either way, it'll be my choice. Not something I do because you think I should. I stood up, smoothed my skirt. Thank you for dinner, Mom. The turkey was perfect. You're leaving? She asked. Yes, but we have so much to talk about, Dad said. Do we? I looked around the room, because I think I've said everything I needed to say. I love you all. I really do. But I can't keep coming to these dinners and being treated like the family disappointment, like the charity case, like the one who needs help. We never meant to make you feel that way, Mom said. I know you didn't, but you did. Brandon finally spoke. I'm sorry. I had no idea. I thought. You thought I was a small-time landlord, barely scraping by. Yeah, I know. If I'd known. What? You would have treated me differently? That's the problem, Brandon. I shouldn't have to be successful for you to respect me. I shouldn't have to be rich for Dad to be proud of me. I shouldn't have to meet some arbitrary checklist of accomplishments for Mom to believe I'm building a real life. I picked up my purse. The press coverage tomorrow is going to be significant, I said. You might get calls from reporters, from friends, from people who want to congratulate you on having such a successful daughter. You can say whatever you want, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell them we're close. Emily, Mom, stood up. Please don't go like this. How should I go, Mom? She didn't have an answer. I walked to the door, put on my coat. Brandon followed me. Wait. I turned. He looked genuinely shaken, pale, uncertain. I've been an asshole. Yes. For years. Yes. I'm sorry. I nodded. I appreciate that. Can we fix this? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe, but not tonight. And not by pretending the last 9 years didn't happen. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be different. Equal. You can't be the successful one and I can't be the screw-up. We're both successful, just in different ways. He nodded slowly. Okay. And Brandon? Yeah? About that investment advice you wanted? My consulting rate is $500 an hour. Family discount. His eyes widened. Then, slowly, he smiled. A real smile. Maybe the first genuine smile he'd given me in years. That's fair, he said. I drove home to my apartment in the 3rd ward, the one my mother thought was sad and small, the one that was actually a 3-bedroom penthouse in a building I owned. I poured myself a glass of wine from the bottle I'd been saving. I sat on my balcony overlooking the Milwaukee River and watched the lights from the city reflect on the water. My phone started buzzing with messages. Friends who'd heard the news, business associates sending congratulations, my team celebrating the close. But I ignored them all. I just sat there, in the cold November air, feeling something I hadn't felt in 9 years. Peace. Tomorrow, the world would know. Tomorrow, there would be interviews and articles and attention. Tomorrow, my family would have to reconcile the version of me they'd created with the reality of who I actually was. But tonight, in this moment, I was just Emily, the girl who bought a broken duplex at 23, the woman who built an empire from nothing, the person who proved, at least to herself, that she was always worthy, even when nobody else saw it. I raised my glass to the city skyline. To building something real, I said to the empty air. And I smiled.